I would like to take us a little bit down memory lane before we continue. Can you believe that it's been almost, well, just about 50 years since the mainframe? It feels like the mainframe has been around for like hundreds of years, right? But it's only been about 50 years. If you look at how our systems evolved over the last 50 years, you had client-server architectures in the 1980s, 1990s as well, where we had multi-tier application architectures. And then more recently, we started to move into service-oriented architectures and even down to microservices today. But again, up to that point, a lot of IT was still a back office function. Whether it was ERP, CRM, whether it was payroll systems that you were supporting, IT was very much a middle to back office function. But if we look now at today and what we call the application economy, that picture has changed dramatically. Because nowadays, those IT systems, those applications that you develop, are the revenue generating channels to your customers. In fact, whereas in the old days, we sort of dictated what software we're going to release, what features is going to be in those software releases. If we look at today, it's our customers that's telling us, this is what I want, this is how I want it, and by the way, this is when I want it as well. So this whole ecosystem have changed where the customer is sort of dictating to us what we need to deliver. And that's put a lot of pressure on organizations. So it's then obvious to say that, we need to be able to deliver these new innovations to our customers faster. I mean, if we think about it, there's so many startup companies nowadays that's trying to steal some of your market shares today. I mean, just the number of unicorn companies valued at $1 billion or more, are literally growing by the day. And we can see that more and more executives are pressured every day to release more apps quickly. And I like the quote from Forrester, which says, optimizing the delivery value chain has become the new means to better business outcomes. And that is what continuous delivery is all about. How can we optimize that value chain and be more competitive and compete with the startups of this world? I mean, it's also an interesting stat that I read this week, that apparently by next week, we will hit the 4 billion mobile users mark in the world. So that's 4 billion users. So again, the whole application economy, mobile devices, is exploding. But it's not just about speed, right? I mean, if we look at the fact that the way that you interact with your customers today is not necessarily through call centers or walk-in centers or even brick-and-mortar stores on the street corner. Instead, today, the way that you interact with your customers is through applications or through the mobile applications that you take to market. So it is absolutely necessary for you to ensure that the quality of those applications that you deliver to your customers is of an exceptional quality, because that carries the reputational image and the brand of your organization. So we see that 2/3 of business leaders say that the company's future absolutely depends on the quality of the software they take to market. But then let's look at a couple of things. If we're going to be able to compete with these startups that's trying to steal some of our market share, how are we going to do that? Well, first we need to look at the problem. What are traditional companies in this two-speed world looking to solve in order to be more competitive and innovative? So let's make it a little bit more real. If we look at developers, for instance, you will have development teams working on different components within a particular project. The problem is that those teams are all dependent on each other. So there's a lot of what we call idle time, time where you wait on other teams to finish developing before you can start developing your bit, right? A lot of organizations have started to also adopt continuous integration, which is great for developers. It allows you to check in your code basically on a daily basis and understand if there's any defects in your application. The problem is, all of those builds have to be deployed and validated in a number of test environments. But we don't always have unlimited test environments at our disposal to do all of that. So what do? Well, either you delay the project go live But we've just seen on the previous slide that speed is absolutely paramount. Or we delay our testing till much later on in the software life cycle. But that would cost a lot more rework, and as we know, the longer we wait to solve these defects, the more it costs your bottom line. And even if you do have enough environments to test in, there's still the question around data. The ability to create those real-world production-like environments where you can yield a higher degree of testing in terms of functional test coverage in the applications that you're testing. And last but not least, there's also a lot of manual testing still ongoing, adding further delays to your software lifecycle. Then if we look further on, I mean, things like Poppy is also becoming more and more relevant nowadays as well from a data point of view. You know, you can't just take production data anymore and deploy it into a pre-production environment. And there's obviously regulatory issues around that that we also need to think about. And then we also need to look at all of those different areas in the software development lifecycle, whether you're a developer, a tester, a release manager, or in operations. Everyone in these disciplines have their own set of tools that they use to perform their function and their role. The question is, if I'm going to start to practice continuous delivery, how do I make all of these things work together? How do I orchestrate all of these tools? So traditionally, organizations will use a lot of scripting to be able to link all of these things together, but we all know that scripting is very brittle, and you know, if anything changes, your scripts needs to be updated. So it sort of becomes counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve. And then ultimately, that all leads to not just slow time to market, but also the quality aspect we spoke about earlier on. How many defects are leaking into your production code and ultimately uncovered by your customers? So there must be a better way to solve these issues. So continuous delivery, you could say, solves that through tooling to create a highly automated end-to-end software pipeline. If we look at the top again, you know, how do we solve some of these problems? Well, for instance, a concept that's been coined a couple of years back called service virtualization plays a key role here, because if we can build and configure simulated environment instances, that allows us to start developing a lot earlier. Those developers don't have to wait on their counterparts to complete their development. The ability to virtualize services and APIs and make it available to developers and testers to consume will allow us to start doing what we call parallel development and shift left our whole software development lifecycle as a result of that. Then going on from there, the ability to, and Lionel also spoke about it earlier on, what if we can automate the creation of our test scripts? What kind of productivity does that mean to your organization? The ability to automate not just your test cases, but to be able to do that and automate your actual test case scripts as a result of that. So again, we need to look at innovation like this if we're going to optimize that value chain. Not to mention the fact that any good test data management solution is also paramount to the success of this journey that we're on. The ability to create test data on demand and consume it freely. And then from that point onwards, we also need to look at the whole orchestration of this delivery value chain. You know, we spoke about this disparate tool sets across operations, release, and developers and testers. We need an application release automation system that will allow us to orchestrate this end-to-end from development through test and ultimately into production. And then ultimately that would lead to not just faster time to market, but hopefully better quality products for our customers as well. And to support all of this, you really need a continuous delivery solution that's an open system, that's fully integrated with any number of tools that you've currently got in use in your organizations today. So on your continuous delivery journey, you know, no one is suggesting that you should replace your software, but how do I orchestrate and deliver on all the investments that I've already got in my organization? So just to walk you through an example, this is typically what you can expect from a continuous delivery workflow. On the far left-hand side corner, This is where your business analyst will typically capture your user requirements. And from there on, you will have your enterprise architect looking at what components and services you need to develop and provide. And then if you look at the bottom left, that's where the developers start to do the actual coding, followed by your continuous integration systems that you might have in place. We will do our daily builds or nightly builds. Then we move on to our test and QA here. And again, here is all about how do I automate my testing, because we still find that a lot of testing is still very much manual today. So the ability to go and automate a lot of your testing, but also to create your test data to support your testing efforts. And then we have on the right-hand side what we call deployment automation. That's where typical application release automation plays a big role. And then we will also be able to stand up new environments across dev, test, QA, and prod, using any number of configuration management tools and provisioning tools that you might have in your environment, whether it's the likes of Docker, Chef, and Puppet, and so forth. And then right at the top, you have your release manager that controls this whole process. You need to get to the point where your release managers can literally press a button, and the code will go from your source repository systems all the way into production. Now, I know for a lot of companies that's still far off, but that's sort of the nirvana state, the art of the possible of where we're trying to get to. So to support that, maybe this is an interesting slide. It shows a maturity curve, and everyone can have a look on this and sort of see where you find yourself on this journey today. If I just quickly walk you through this, level 1 is pretty much everything is still done manually in your organization. You provision environments manually, you do your code develop or compiling manually. But then when you move to level 2, this is where we start to introduce scripting. So you might have a continuous integration system in place already. You might have a configuration management system in place already. And you will find that DevOps has started to be practiced in pockets within the organization. But again, it's very much still focused on scripting. If we start to look at level 3, this is where we start to create what we call common, reusable, and automated application delivery processes that runs across multiple environments. The ability to say, you know what, I don't care if I deploy into Amazon or Azure or on-prem. I'm going to build processes that support all of those platforms. And this is also where we're going to start to introduce things like automated testing, maybe first at the UI level. And then as we start to move to level 4, this is now where we take our automated testing further into what we call APIs, and also the ability to automate all the components in my application stack, ESB and middleware and so forth. But this is also where we're going to start to look at things like service virtualization to simulate constrained backend systems, and also test data, the ability to create test data and consume it on demand when you need it. And then lastly, but not least, level 5, this is when we start to practice what we call rapid continuous delivery. So at this stage, everything is fully automated, end-to-end, from idea all the way through development and into production. But really what makes level 5 interesting is this is where we start to drive out inefficiencies in our whole continuous delivery implementation. This is where we can start to see what we need to solve, what we need to improve on, and where we can drive out all of those inefficiencies to really start to achieve those economies of scale. And then just very lastly, this is just a slide to show you something about the DevOps ecosystem out there. And the whole idea behind this is just to say that, you know what, you're not going to solve this problem with just 1 or 2 tools out there. There's a myriad of tools, from planning to develop to test to deploy and operate, that all have to work in unison if we're going to solve this problem. And there's a vast number of vendors out there that can help you today to solve some of these key challenges that you face and to become more competitive in the market. Thank you very much.